10-Minute Jazz Lesson Podcast, episode 155. Hey everybody, welcome back into yet another episode of the 10-Minute Jazz Lesson Podcast. This is episode 155 and continues our Tune of the Month series. This week is going to feature the great Charlie Parker composition, Confirmation, and is hopefully going to clear some things up for you and make this tune a little bit more approachable, as well as give you something fantastic to work on over the changes. But before we jump into the episode, just want to remind everybody you can get the PDF to this episode and all of our other episodes by going to our Patreon page. You can find that by going to our website, 10minutejazzlesson.com, and clicking on one of the Patreon links. And this week is a doozy because you're going to get the exercises that I'm going to show you. You're going to also get the etude, and you're going to get that in all keys, B flat, E flat, and concert pitch. So that's going to be fantastic for you no matter what instrument you play. And just a reminder that all of our support to keep this show coming at you week after week in high quality is from our supporters on Patreon. So thank you out there to everybody that has signed up to be a supporter. It's only $3 a month and you get all these kind of fantastic benefits. And I want to give a quick shout out to the people that have joined up this week. So thank you to Nicola, Kevin, David, and Michelle. Thank you guys so much for joining up in the family. Hope you're getting a lot out of your subscription. And if you're somebody that wants to sign up to support the podcast and get all the PDFs and everything else that we do, including the bonus content from last week's episode, then head over to our website, click on the Patreon banner, get yourself signed up to be a supporter, and make sure that this show lives on. All right, let's jump into today's episode. So today we're going to be looking at Confirmation by Charlie Parker. And this is one of those tunes that is extremely intimidating. Just the pure amount of chord changes and the tempo that this is usually played at usually combine to turn a lot of people off from this tune before they even get started. Even the melody is like one of the harder melodies in the jazz canon. So this tune can be tough to approach. But what I wanted to do was simplify actually some of the hardest chord changes. And the hardest chord changes in my mind occur between measure 2 and measure 5 in this tune. What it is this descending run of 2-5-1 progressions that all lead into each other and they go right around the circle of fourths. So if you were to be looking at a lead sheet for Confirmation or looking at your PDF from this week, you would see that starting in measure 2, we do a concert E minor 7 flat 5 chord into an A7 chord. Then that leads right into D minor 7 to G7. And that leads right into C minor 7 to F7. And then it finally comes to a conclusion, that particular chord progression, with a B flat 7 chord. So what this is pure circle of fourths, descending 2-5-1 progressions that never really resolve. The resolution point actually just kicks off the next 2-5, right? So this can be a hard thing to do because, first of all, they're short 2-5-1 progressions, and they're in kind of tough keys for a lot of instruments. So this can turn us off right away. But I wanted to give you a cool exercise where what you're doing is you're coming up with a short 2-5-1 line that leads directly into the next one. So we're practicing our voice leading. We're also practicing not having to jump around our instrument and not having to make our lines sound jagged. We want these really smooth flowing lines that go from one measure into the next. So the thing we have to worry about when we take that approach to it is that the end of the measure has to lead into the beginning of the next measure. So what I've done for you on the first page of your PDF is I've come up with 3 of these lines, of said lines that lead from one right into the other. So I'm going to play them for you, give you an example of how they sound, and then the etude is actually based around these 3 pieces of vocabulary because that progression happens 3 times in the form of confirmation. So let me explain the first one, and then I'll play it for you. So I'm starting on the 5th of the 2 chord, right? So I want to write a line that ends close to the 5th of the next 2 chord, okay? That's my whole point in writing these lines. So I'm starting on the 5th, I'm coming down the arpeggio of the 2 chord, 5, 3, 1, 7. Then I'm connecting that to the 5 chord by way of the 3rd. I'm going right back up the arpeggio. I'm going 3, 5, 7, flat 9. And then that flat 9 that I'm ending the measure with leads perfectly into the 5th of the next 2 chord. So when you hear this, you're going to hear that my line leads seamlessly from one measure to another. And that's going to start allowing you to hear this progression and start allowing you to handle it in a much better way. Let me play the first one for you, and then we'll go on to the second one. So you can hear there's no jumping around. There's no, we're not just playing random lines that don't kind of lead into each other. And this is the way to work on this progression, in my opinion. All right, so let's go on to number 2. What I'm doing on number 2 is I'm actually starting on the root of the 2 chord, playing up 1, 2, 3, jumping back down to the root of the 2 chord. Then I'm jumping down to the 3rd of the 5 chord, going 3, 2, 1, jumping back up to the 3rd of the 5 chord, and then that 3rd leads perfectly into the root of the next 2 chord. So again, I'm thinking about voice leading. I'm thinking about creating a line that is going to seamlessly lead from one measure to another, although this sounds very different because of the structure of the line and what note it's beginning and ending on. Okay, so let's check out what example number 2 on your PDF sounds like. So again, I'm concentrating on that transition from measure to measure. And of course, when you're improvising over this tune, you're not going to want to do things that are that repetitive, but it's a great way to practice, and it will naturally lead you, if you work on a bunch of these, it'll naturally lead you to more variety and a more unpredictable and natural sound. It's all about sounding very predictable and unnatural when you're practicing, and then transitioning into a more off-the-cuff style. All right, let's get into the 3rd line. So on this one, I'm starting on the 3rd of the 2 chord. So we've covered the 5th of the 2 chord, the root, and now we're on the 3rd. I'm going up a triplet. So I'm going up 3, 5, 7. Then I'm jumping up to the root, coming back down to the 7, which is going to lead me perfectly into the 3rd of the 5 chord. Then I'm coming down the 5 chord, going 3, flat 9, 1, 7, and of course that 7 leads me perfectly into the 3rd of the next 2 chord. So let's check out what the 3rd example on your PDF sounds like. And I like that one because of its rhythmic variety. I love playing triplets over these kind of forms because that's something that Bird did a lot. And I just feel like triplets kind of propel you on to that next beat or that next measure or whatever. Love triplets. Great way to achieve some rhythmic variety and have a little bit of fun in your playing. All right, so that about does it for the 3 exercises. Now, what I've done is I have written the etude, as I always do for you on these Tune of the Month episodes. And the etude is really going to contain all 3 of these examples, but in action. So you can actually hear one of them leading into the next one. And then obviously I've written a bunch of other material around these particular exercises that just sounds good. So feel free to steal anything from this etude, put it into your own playing. But I think the bigger picture here is if you are somebody that has been afraid to play over this tune, just slow it down and get started. That's really what it is. This will make a lot more sense to you if you just start doing it. We could sit there and we could be afraid of certain tunes like this or giant steps or rhythm changes or whatever. But really, when we start to dive into it, we see that it's just a combination of a bunch of devices that we already know about, but we might just be afraid to get started. So turn that tempo way down and start working on this tune. It also has the advantage of, when you go back to other tunes that are a little bit more spread out, it seems so much easier than this particular tune, which is kind of a nice feeling. You start to realize, okay, if I work on something super hard, other things are going to feel a little bit easier. Okay, so make sure you go and grab the PDF to this episode. All the information is there. You can do that by going to our Patreon page. Thank you to our new supporters. Thank you to our old supporters. Thank you to all of our supporters. We really appreciate that. And we're going to end the episode this week with the etude that I've written for you in full. Have a great weekend, everybody. Hopefully this has been of benefit to you, and we'll talk to you next week with some new episodes. Have a great one, everybody. Bye.